These 5 strategies helped me to pay off my student loans completely. I am student debt free. Oh my gosh. Hi, guys. Welcome back. So, today we're going to talk about the 5 steps that I use to pay off $31,250 worth of student loans in 2 years. So, the journey begins. The journey begins in 2022 when I decided to go back to school. Now, prior to going back to school, I had about $5,000 worth of student loans with me that I carried over to 2022. I had took out that initial $5,000 for personal expenses. Now 2022 comes around and I now decided to go back to school. That program was 16 months long, so it was from 2022, January of 2022 to mid 2023, April of 2023. That program cost was about $26,000 and some change. So that $26,000 mixed with that $5,000, yes, I was still paying off that $5,000 even years later, amounted my student loan debt to $31,250. I want to put this in perspective for you. The career at the time that I was in was only about mid 40s that I was making, about $45,000. So you can see my debt to income ratio as it pertains to my student loan was astronomical. As I was going through my program, I was paying down other debts. I had used the debt snowball method at the time, so I was making payments on my medical debt at the time, my 2 credit cards, and my car loans. So as I was going through school, I was doing that, just trying to reduce those balances so I can free up some money. That is a very big thing that I did, and it was really good that I did it. So remember when I told you that $5,000 that I took out in 2017? I did. And I still had it 6, 7 years later when I went back to school. I was making $91 per month of minimum payments. And that really was just that. It was the minimum payment that I was making. Clearly, those minimum payments were not making a dent. And if I had continued on that trajectory, I probably would have finished paid off that $5,000 loan in maybe 10 years. Because again, the majority was going to interest and not to the principal. That was infuriating. Seeing how much momentum that I was gaining, how much traction that I was gaining in my other loans as I paid those off, and then finishing in mid 2023 really gave me that energy that I needed to tackle this debt down. I needed to get rid of this. I needed more money in my pocket. So, what steps did I use to make sure that this happened? Step number 1, I wanted this gone. I decided that it was time for me to get rid of this student loan. I did not want that $31,000 balance to be the same as that $5,000 that I had 6, 7 years ago, because that 31,000 was going to carry on for 15, 20, who knows, maybe even 25 years, like a whole mortgage. And I don't even have a mortgage. I don't want that. So that step number 1 that I did was I wanted that student loan gone. I decided that it was a priority for me to pay this down. It was important to me to pay this down. Step number 2, I needed to plan how I was going to do this. And by planning, I mean I needed a budget. Now, I know sometimes we hear this word budget and it sounds like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to eat. Oh my gosh. No, no, no. I created a budget that allowed me to see where my money was going and where I needed to allocate extra funds based on the priority that I just made. My priority was to pay down my student loan. So, therefore, my money My budget, my lifestyle needed to adhere to that priority. Step number 3, reducing and eliminating non priority expenses. Notice the key word here: priority, priority, priority. I established that step number 1, my student loan was a priority. My step number 3, non priority expenses had to be reduced or completely eliminated. Examples of these non priority expenses may be cutting off vacations or reducing the amount of vacations that you take per year. Another example of that is not eating out. That is a really big one, and it takes a huge amount of chunk out of our monthly budgets. Another non priority expense may be reducing or eliminating hair maintenance, eyelash maintenance, and nail maintenance. These maintenances, for the most part, has to be maintained for about 2 weeks, bi-weekly, about 2 times per month, and that can get costly. So a way to try to reduce this would be learning to do this on my own, watching other YouTube videos on how can I braid my own hair, how I can paint my nails or put maybe fake nails on instead, getting fake eyelashes and putting them on, or in my case, using extra mascara. Use it. It works. Look. It works. So those are some of the expenses that I had to reduce or completely eliminate altogether. And I can tell you that it absolutely works. Does it take sacrifice? It absolutely does. It requires sacrifice. But again, my priority is to get out of this. My priority was not to prolong this. My priority was to not take this on for 10 years, as the plan really for student loans tends to be about 10, 15, 20 years of having this. I'm not going to carry that, and neither should you. Step number 4 was making timely payments. So, ways to make timely payments may be automating those payments. If you are someone who does not remember to make those payments, I suggest that you automate them. For me, on the other hand, I did not automate them only because I was a little iffy of how my budgets were, other things coming out of my paycheck. So I did go in manually and submit that every single month. My monthly payments were due on the 15th of every month, and I made those payments much earlier. Keep this in mind, please. Much earlier before that 15th day hit, because student loans, as you can probably tell, takes a couple of days to process the payments. It can take about 2, 3 business days to process. So if I made a payment on Friday, I don't want to make a payment on the 15th of the month on Friday. And then now I am hit with fees. The goal of making timely payments is to avoid more fees from accruing. You do not want that, because we want to keep more money in our pockets and put more money to attack the student loan. The very last step that I did, and this worked wonderful for me, was strategizing my payments. Here's the first one. At times, I would save a huge chunk of money to put towards my student loans. So I can tell you the very first time that I made a huge amount was actually February of 2025, of this year. I saved up about $10,000 and I made a huge chunk of payment to my student loans. Now, when I did this, this goes on to that second strategy. When I made this payment, I first made my minimum amount of payment that included that interest. So let's say my minimum amount of payment at the time I would say was about maybe $230. That 230 included the principal and it included my interest rate. my interest amount. I made that first initial payment. Then, after a couple of days, once that payment processed, I then decided to take that huge chunk and put it towards the principal balance. Because I had made an initial payment, that huge chunk went straight to that principal balance. And I did this days apart from each other. So I'll give you an example. In February, I made a payment, let's say early February, like February 2, February 3, right? I made that minimum payment. I waited for that to process. It processed, let's say by February 7th. February 7th, I took that huge amount of money that I saved up and I now threw it at my principal balance. Once I did this, it substantially reduced my overall student loan. And that is really the momentum that I was able to gain this year. I gained so much momentum. Momentum physically, momentum psychologically, and momentum financially to be able to attack my debt. And I want to ask you guys this question. Do you have student loan? If you do, how much do you have? Mine, $31,250. How much do you have? And how are you planning on attacking this? These 5 strategies helped me to pay off my student loans completely. I am student debt free. Oh my gosh. That's my first time screaming that out. That's my first time saying it really out loud. It's been internalized. I have internalized it for so long, but I'm done with it. It is paid in full. And I can't wait to see your student loan debt free journey. Let me know in the comments below when you're going to be debt free. I can't wait to see you in the next one.